Here we go. All right, so our topic today is about innovation. Has anybody heard anything about innovation today? Have you heard any buzzwords yet today? None. Okay, good. You guys, the world is our oyster. Here we go. So we'll spend a couple minutes. I have a long list of things I do want to talk about with these guys today, but we'll start with introductions. So I'm Jocelin Schultz. I work with Kenvue. I'm part of the team that Matt's on, so I'm responsible for the capabilities and innovation part of the team. So we're a reverse panel. Usually you guys hear the teams talking to the advertisers. Today we're talking to the tech. So I'm going to hand it over to Jeff and then to Justin to introduce yourselves. Please give everybody a sense of who you are, what it is you do, and what does your company do?
I'm Jeff Rich. Work at Exco. We are an OVP, sort of a next-gen OVP for publishers.
No more acronyms.
An online video platform. So we power the video player, the content library, and the server for all the content and advertising that lives within the video player on the site. We do this for about 1,000 brands, and I guess our unique thing is that we use machine learning to seamlessly, in real time, match content with advertising. Just part of what we do with every single ad call.
Great, I'm Justin Cosgrove. Good morning, everybody. I work with SmartMedia Technologies. We are an enterprise loyalty and engagement platform. We're built on the blockchain, but we like to think of ourselves lovingly as a Web3 mullet. Web2 up front, Web3 in the back. The whole goal is to make the technology extremely seamless for customers to use and understand and extract the utility and benefits that blockchain brings to the table. So excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, they've already dropped a few of my buzzwords. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to try and cram it all in if we have time. We want to talk about emerging trends in media technology. We want to talk about the technology that perhaps has evolved a little bit, that Justin teed up a little bit. We are going to talk a little bit about the future state of programmatic and supply path optimization. What else are we going to talk about? Engagement. They both work on engagement things, so let's talk about engagement. If we have time, we'll get a little deeper into personalization. We might skip it if I get the hook. But we also want to do a bit of predictions for the next year, because what's the point of a thing about next year if we don't talk about what's going to happen next year? Does that sound good? Enough? All right, good. So let's start. Before we go forwards, let's look backwards. We are a 2024 Media, what do we call it? Media Horizons Innovations for the Year Ahead. But let's take a moment to look back. And I'd love to hear from you guys around what were some trends that maybe at this conference were being talked about last year. What's fizzled that we really thought was going to be a big deal by now, and what maybe still has some legs that you guys are keeping an eye on kind of at this point in time?
I'll jump in. Very publisher focused at our company, and vertical video on websites, mobile websites in particular, has been a pretty hot topic. I wouldn't say it's fizzled, that's a strong word, but it certainly has its ups and downs. I think, there's a reason that none of us are using Quibi today. And I think we've learned just in terms of behavior that we're very comfortable flipping our phone on its side to watch YouTube or to stream Netflix. But the fact of the matter is that advertisers have a ton of vertical video assets, and publishers want to capitalize on that. So I think, any good sort of trend or buzzy trend may not pick up the way that we hope it would, but it does tend to leave a mark, and we're still figuring out what the right orientation for vertical video is on publisher websites. So interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, great. I would say two trends that we've seen. Really, again, fizzle, a little bit of a strong word, but
You can say good things too.
yeah, good thing, right? Like Web3 has changed a lot since last year. We're talking about Web3 and NFTs and crypto in a broad sense of terms. I think things have changed, really focused more on utility, the value that those technologies bring to marketers, so I think that's evolved a lot. I also think cookieless is still kind of like the hurry up and wait for everybody, right? So we're talking about cookieless for the last couple of years. It's something that brands have been continuing to prepare for. Same with on the tech side, and we're still not there. Getting there in 2024, but I think people have kind of, not that it's less important, but been like, all right, we'll figure it out when it gets here, because it's been delayed so many times.
Good. I have some questions for you guys on that. Don't worry. But you did bring up things like blockchain, NFT, Web3. So I feel like for the last 12 months, well, maybe not 6 months, all I hear is AI, 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 and I haven't really heard as much noise about Web3, NFTs, blockchains to the same degree. We're not going to talk about AI in our session, guys, but I do want to hear.
Yes, we are.
I do want to hear about kind of evolution of Web3, and I think, Jocelin specifically, your company is a blockchain-based tech. So I'd love to hear kind of, I don't know if we would call the tech yet at teenager level, maybe, almost. But how has the industry evolved in a way that has actually added utility that makes sense for actual marketers now?
Yeah, listen, it's definitely growing up. I mean, I think what you've seen is the natural life cycle of any new and emerging technology. There's speculation and hype cycle to begin, right? We saw that with the NFT craze. How much money can somebody make on a Bored Ape Yacht Club picture of an ape that's a JPEG, right? There was nothing tangible behind that. So then following the hype cycle of any new technology, you get a speculation period where there's bad actors, where there's problems with the technology. And I think that's kind of what we hit at the beginning of this year, is where like Web3 crypto, NFTs almost became a bad word. But what we've seen in our business, and especially as we continue to round out the year, that brands are not shying away. Rather, that terminology is more falling to the background, and brands instead are focused on how blockchain can help them engage with customers in a deeper way and in a more personalized way. And in a lot of ways that we're seeing this come to bear is changing the way that brands look at their current loyalty infrastructure, right? There's inherent benefit within blockchain-based technologies around cookieless data collection and one-to-one engagement and personalization and privacy. So these are the types of things that are coming to the forefront for Web3, and now what we're seeing is Web3 and blockchain enter its utilitarian cycle, where growth is going to be slow and steady, but this is where it's no longer speculative. Rather, brands, advertisers, tech businesses find where blockchain fits into their infrastructure to ultimately drive towards what we've been always trying to achieve, which is better outcomes for advertisers and a better experience for customers. Frankly, the tech that helps us get there doesn't really matter, and that's kind of where we're seeing blockchain fall back into the background. I'll leave us with one analogy on this and then pass it to Jeff, but I like thinking about this is like Web3 is like the Intel core processor sticker on the Dell computer. That's intentional if there's any Dell folks in the room. But listen, nobody knows what that core processing sticker means. No one really cares that it's on there from a consumer standpoint, right? It's just the underlying tech that powers the machine. The customers care about a wonderful experience back from that Dell computer, and the Dell manufacturer cares about delivering a differentiated experience for their customer. The Intel core processor powers both of those outcomes, and that's the way that we're starting to think about Web3 and blockchain as it fits into the advertising ecosystem.
Awesome. Jeff, from like SSP, DSP, where do you think the future goes from these types of technology evolutions for SSPs and DSPs?
I think, when we do talk about AI, very briefly, we do talk about the fact of the downside of people maybe pirating content, claiming it's their own. And that's a very real thing, and it's a concern that publishers, networks have. I think on the bright side of that equation, if there is a silver lining, there's some really cool things going on in terms of content certification that have brought us to a level, and Adobe, I think, is leading the charge on this, where something that's been a problem for decades may finally have a solution in digital that was spurred on by our use of AI, generative AI. So in the end, I think that becomes a real positive for content creators, publishers, everyone.
Awesome. All right, so because we want to talk about a lot of stuff, I'm going to move us on to talking about programmatic. So it's an exhausting space. How many of you guys work in programmatic in some way, shape, or form? Okay, it's exhausting to keep up with everything that goes on in programmatic. So here we are. Let's dive in a little bit. I've already heard it 16 times today. Cookie deprecation, privacy regulations, all of those things. I do want to talk to you guys about that. But I want to jump forward to the newest buzzword of SPO. Sorry, no more acronyms. Supply path optimization. That's another hot topic. I don't think that's going away. It's certainly something we're talking about quite a bit in the office. So I think, Jeff, we'll start with you. Kind of what key considerations or innovations do you foresee playing a pivotal role in shaping the future of media SPO?
So it's not a new topic, right? But it's still very relevant, and I think rightfully so. We built this SPO idea based on supply chain from payment chain, really, right? Historically, we've thought about the advertiser being at one end and the publisher being on the other end. That's not entirely wrong, but I think if carbon neutrality is an issue that you're thinking about as a brand, as an advertiser, The payment chain doesn't really tell the full story. So I think, like any topic that is relevant and has been around for a minute, might make sense, and maybe this is something that we'll see next year, to reevaluate what SPO really means. Maybe it should be based just as much on technology and data and the cost associated with that, as it is based on who's on what end, which is really more complex and oversimplified by the way that we've assigned it to advertiser and publisher. There's a lot of relevant companies that are in the middle there that serve a very real purpose. So you don't want to discount every intermediary just for being an intermediary.
Jocelin, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that supply path optimization is another tool within the programmatic tech stack, right? And at the end of the day, I think that advertisers, agencies, tech companies are still trying to find the best way to that end impression, right? It's the classic formula. They want to drive attention, interest, decision, and action. And if they can understand what supply is going to help them get there the fastest and with the most efficiency, that's going to be really valuable. I think a lot of things are going to go into SPO beyond how we traditionally think about it, but looking to connectivity from an activation standpoint as well, right? Like, how does activation actually fit with supply? How do we look at data aggregation and data collection on top of these executions as a way to validate supply? I think there's going to be some really interesting evolutions in that respect. But certainly an important topic. And listen, programmatic is changing every single day. That's where I started my digital career at TubeMogul and then at MIQ before that. So it's exciting to see.
Awesome. All right, and before we move off programmatic, let's talk for a second about cookie deprecation and privacy regulations. So what are you both thinking about in terms of preparing for that going into 2024 that maybe was different than where we were beginning of this year?
I can start with that one, yeah. So it's one of the reasons I started working at SMT is because when cookies go away, brands are going to need a way to connect in a personalized manner with customers in a compliant way. And what that's going to come down to at the end of the day is value exchange. So customers are going to have control back of their data in a cookieless world, and brands are going to have to ask permission to collect that data. So in turn, what are they going to give customers now for that data? What are they going to give customers to continue to come back and have a real relationship with the brand? And then how are they fundamentally going to measure those brand engagements all the way down towards business outcomes? I think that's what we're looking to solve for here, and I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, I think if any of us had a magic bullet for life after, then we'd be very rich. I think it's probably a combination of a couple of different things. Audience targeting, huge part of it, but also contextual targeting. And this is not some plan B. Contextual targeting is probably the earliest type of ad targeting that we've ever had. And it works, and I think some of the advancements that we have, don't want to use more acronyms, machine learning, generative AI, can help us to better decision, and this is some of the technology that we use at Exco, how to more naturally and organically align an ad with a piece of content at the video level for us, not just the page level, which we can all do. So I think there's a combination of maybe a couple of different disciplines that can get us where we need to be. Like everything, I think it's been a long time that we've been discussing this issue, and adoption for that reason probably hasn't been as rapid as we would have liked for content providers. But I think we'll get there, and we'll be forced to get there next year. And I'm excited to see what we come up with.
Cool. All right, you've teed up a bit on engagement. So we did talk before this, and I think we could have spent this whole time talking about engagement, but I took a long time to get us there because I feel like this might be where we just keep talking. But I do want to ask you guys, you both work on technology focused on engagement. Jeff, we can start with you. How has engagement, maybe even just take a minute, define engagement. I want to talk about personalization later, but talk about engagement. I feel like that word is almost a buzzword in and of itself at this point in time. How has that evolved, and what kinds of ad tech are actually driving that?
So maybe this makes me a bit on the old school side, but I like the traditional sort of engagement metrics that I think most of us in this room are all used to. And I work in video, so for me it's viewability, it's VCR, video completion rate, and I think those are still the main drivers for whether your video campaign is working. But obviously there's been a lot of attention on attention metrics, and I think it's really promising. I think it's relatively still, I don't want to say infancy, but maybe it's a teenager. And it's still, I think, largely based on, small focus groups and eye tracking and a lot of interesting things. But I think in the sense, like, you gotta have the main sort of standbys of, did somebody view the ad? Did they get to the end of the advertisement before you can really dive into attention on a page and how people's behavior works and how accurate that can be. But I think it's an interesting new piece of the puzzle. So yeah, it's my take.
Yeah, I love that. I can build on that from an attention standpoint. Like, I don't think there is any engagement without attention, personally. You have to have somebody's attention in order to get them to engage. So I think that's a great step for the industry. When I think about engagement fundamentally, I'm thinking about, is the brand or is the consumer taking an action, making a decision that is in the interest of continued conversation with my brand? I think about engagement as the desire to continue that relationship with a brand from a consumer standpoint versus an interaction that might happen in a static environment, such as a click or something like that. Not that that's not useful, because there's definitely good value that can be brought from all of those different traditional metrics. But I think as we work towards what engagement truly means, it's how does a customer end up taking an action that matters to your business, such as making a purchase or signing up for your newsletter or going into a retailer of choice. That is engagement to me, and the key is going to be understanding, and I think this ties nicely back to cookieless, right? Blockchain's a big piece of this, having opted-in permissions to converse with a consumer in a one-to-one personalized way and measure those touch points, right? So if we can start to understand how a television advertisement drives attention that then results in engagement of a customer going in store and buying a product, that's the holy grail. So I think we're working our way there with these different pieces of the puzzle, as Jeff mentioned, but attention definitely key, and then for me, engagement is all about, does the end result of the action matter to the brand and benefit the customer?
Awesome. And what do you think? How many brand people are in the room? Or advertisers, I guess I'll call you. All right. What do you guys think these guys need to think about when it comes to engagement?
I would say that innovation is your friend when it comes to engagement, right? Because engagement takes a lot of different shapes and forms. There's engagement from an ad, there's an engagement at an experiential event, there's an engagement with a brand who's partnering with a sports team, for example, right? So I think that finding ways to infuse new technologies that help connect these different engagement points and start to bring value from some of the hardest and most traditional channels to measure is going to be really key when we think about engagement. How can brands get one step closer to understanding what engagement means for television when you're spending $150 million in television, right? How does a brand understand what a Super Bowl sponsorship actually means to them for a customer taking action prior or post being exposed to that, right? So I think that's what we need to think about is how can we look at engagement as a connective kind of term from activation all the way down through to measurement. And then I would encourage brands to look at innovative technologies that help them plug those gaps to better understand those connective points.
Couldn't have said it better. I think it's ultimately working backwards from the outcome that you're looking for, right? So there's a million different options for you to measure success, to measure performance, and I think for every brand, and there's a lot of unique brands in the room, that chemistry is different. So yeah.
All right. Good. How are we on time? Good? Okay. Okay. All right. We have time for personalization, guys. All right. So I had a lot of questions around personalization as an advertiser. It's always about right place, right message, right person, right time, right moment. You can get a little extreme and really churn through a lot of resources to get to personalization. And my question to these guys was when does it matter? When does it not? So my real question is, first of all, there really isn't a consistent definition of personalization either. So I'd love for you both to tell us when I say personalization, what do you think of? And then, what are brands and advertisers getting right and wrong in that space? And how can technology help move the world forward in the right direction in there?
You used the term holy grail before, right? I think that is what we think of when we think of personalization. We think of a one-to-one match, and it's sort of a unicorn. And frankly, if we step back, do consumers, do audiences really want a personal engagement with every brand that tries to reach them in every ad? Probably not. But I do think what they want is relevance, right? So I think, in terms of personalization, we're all pretty good at understanding the targeting part of it. We know, or we think we know, we define who a consumer is, who a prospect might be, and we have tools that we can use to find that person. I think where we sometimes slip and don't do the extra work is catering the messaging to that individual. So I think, lots of options out there in terms of technology. That's the open-ended question for 2024 is, what new technologies, are they AI, based, can we use to customize messaging to that audience that we know how to reach? Because I think ultimately that's the goal, right? Is to at least make them feel like you care. Sending a geo-targeted message that says hello to a DMA doesn't feel very personal to me, but maybe something that is a little more, below the surface could have a real impact.
Yeah, I think personalization is difficult. There's a couple of things that you have to manage, right? Especially when you're thinking about the efficacy of personalization, because a lot of brands have a certain way that they want to be perceived by customers, right? A brand message, values, guidelines that they want to make sure that they get across. So that's difficult to tailor that down and adjust to every single individual who's a potential consumer. So I think that where we land is kind of a middle ground for personalization. How can we provide semi-personalized messages to targeted groups of audience that hopefully drive a better outcome? I think dynamic creative optimization is a wonderful tool in that respect. But then again, another reason why I love working at SMT is just a way to really focus on personalization in a one-to-one way without cookies is going to be really fundamentally important for brands. And so that's what having a blockchain-based strategy allows you, right? Having folks opt in. It's compliant, it's connected, it's cookieless. And so having that level of measurability, I think, is going to be really, really important as we move forward as well. But listen, that type of personalization is going to be for the folks who choose to have that personalization. Without cookies, you're going to choose to have personalized experiences from a brand by opting in and by giving them their data. So then I think it's the brand's responsibility to focus on their most loyal, if you will, or most engaged customers and provide a deeper personalized experience than what they necessarily might think of for the second tier and then the broadest tiers.
Interesting. Don't forget about the folks who aren't opted in. What's the message to them?
Exactly.
All right, we're gonna end with a couple fun things. All right, you guys are now in a magical conference room. You can have whoever you want on the other side of the table. Tell us who you have and what is it you want to convince of them to make them better prepared than they would be without talking to you for next year.
Okay, that's a good one. Who wouldn't want to talk to their younger self?
Right?
Right?
Keep it more in the business world.
And I think, your colleague, Matthew, I think, said it well. Strong beliefs loosely held. I think we work in one of the most rapidly evolving businesses, which is a stamp, a badge, I should say. And that's great, but I think, we need to find things that work, but we also have to remain completely open to what we don't know. And so I think just in terms of general overarching advice, I know that I wish I was a little more like that, let's say, 10 years ago, than I am now, because things do change really quickly, and it's tough to keep up.
Justin, who are you talking to?
Yeah, I mean, take your pick of a Fortune 100 brand CMO, and I'll take that. Sitting down with them. So what I would say there is listen, when we think about innovation, don't be scared, right? Don't be scared. This is the time to think about the utility of technologies like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, not get caught up in the OpenAI news or the Binance and FTX news, and rather try to decouple that and compartmentalize a little bit and focus on how underlying technology can benefit your business and help you achieve goals from current ecosystem that you already have a lot of money put into, right, in the marketing sphere. So that's what I would say, is that it's always tough to innovate in the face of headwinds when it seems like all the news is kind of doom and gloom, but that's actually the best time to innovate. And the brands that choose to focus on the utility and find that opportunity are the ones that end up leading the way.
Awesome. All right, I see the hook, but I'm going to ask you guys one more question. We've done a great job, right? Ish? You're going to have us back next year, right? Okay. So what are you guys going to talk about next year when we're sitting here and I'm going to be asking you more questions? What are you predicting we'll be talking about, Justin?
I'm predicting we're going to see a very similar year for AI this year as we did, or in 2024 as we did for Web3 in 2023. And that's going to be kind of the end of the hype cycle and the focus on the utility cycle. I think that's what we're talking about.
Jeff?
I don't know if anyone's dropped $4,000 on Apple's new Vision Pro. I'm really interested to see what happens in the hybrid virtual reality, augmented reality space. And I think it may take longer than a year, but I think just over the course of the next year, we're going to see these devices start to shrink. And we have smart glasses on one side and full out VR on the other side. And as those two come together, it's going to be interesting for content and for consumers, but it's also going to be interesting for everyone in this room, I think.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope this was interesting. Have a good one.
Thank you.